Live from Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Sinead Aherne. Today's top stories: Gardaí and Dungarvan are waiting to interview a husband and wife who were injured in a shooting incident yesterday. There's a good chance phase 2 of the lifting of COVID restrictions will take place next week as planned. A Waterford travel agent says the coronavirus outbreak's one of the toughest challenges they've ever faced. And in sport, the manager of Tramore Racecourse says they'll be able to make their behind closed doors meetings in July viable. Gardaí and Dungarvan have begun an investigation into the circumstances of a shooting incident in West Waterford yesterday afternoon in which a husband and wife suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Gardaí and the emergency services were alerted to the incident at a farm at Ballysaggart at around 5 p.m. When they arrived at the house, they found the woman aged in her 50s and the man in his 60s with injuries. Members of the Armed Support Unit and local Garda units from Lismore and Dungarvan attended the incident, as well as the Garda helicopter. 2 ambulances also attended, and one of the injured parties was taken to University Hospital Waterford, the other to Cork University Hospital for treatment for non-life-threatening injuries. Garda technical experts recovered a legally held shotgun at the scene, which has been sent for examination by Garda forensic experts. No arrests have been made so far in relation to the incident, but Gardaí say the investigation is ongoing. There's a good chance we can move into phase 2 as scheduled. According to the government, the country is due to enter the next phase of the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions on Monday the 8th of June. The government has also issued new guidelines on the reopening of childcare facilities, as Kim Buckley reports.
Although there were reports of a number of breaches of guidelines over the bank holiday weekend, the government says the majority of people were compliant. More restrictions are due to be lifted next Monday as the country enters phase 2. Elizabeth Canavan from the Department of the Taoiseach says they're hopeful that can happen as scheduled.
We know it has been tough. However, as we approach the end of phase 1 of the roadmap, we can see that the efforts everyone has made are continuing to benefit our communities. Hopefully, that gives us a very good chance of moving to phase 2 as scheduled, if we can keep it up for a few more days.
The government's also issued new guidelines on the reopening of childcare facilities on the 29th of June. The children of healthcare and essential workers will be prioritised, along with those with disabilities and children who are disadvantaged. Elizabeth Canavan says the PlayPod model will be implemented.
The purpose of PlayPods is to limit the number of people a child has contact with, to facilitate tracing, and to support close, positive interactions between children and their caregivers.
The government has also confirmed this morning that women returning to work from maternity leave will be able to avail of the temporary COVID-19 wage subsidy scheme from the 12th of June, and it will be backdated to the 26th of March.
There was no change in the number of coronavirus patients at University Hospital Waterford last night. There was just one confirmed case on site at 8 o'clock. A further 4 patients were awaiting the results of COVID-19 testing. A Waterford travel agent says the coronavirus outbreak is one of the toughest challenges they've ever faced. The industry's been at a standstill since the start of March, with flights grounded across the world. Ian Manto is the manager of Harvey Travel in Waterford City. He's in the trade 38 years now.
And we've gone through an awful lot of things in the past, like 9/11, foot and mouth, ash cloud. You can name them all, and the travel trade always kind of bounced back from something like that. But this is unprecedented. This is just, everybody is affected by it. Our trade from middle of February, just booking ceased. Nobody started booking anywhere or going to do so for the future.
Ian Manto says getting people back home was a challenge in the first few weeks.
We had an amount of clients, I mean all over the world. Singapore, New Zealand, Dominican Republic, all over. And it was a huge challenge to try get them back to their family and their homes. Because what happens in a situation like this, the airlines take over the whole structure of what's available. So the live availability has gone out of our system. So our hands are totally tied. So it's a case of contacting each and every airline to try get the client fixed up as soon as possible to get back home. That was a huge challenge, but we got there.
A Waterford TD is again calling for staff and nursing homes to be allowed to carry out coronavirus testing of residents. Matt Shanahan was speaking before the Oireachtas committee examining the COVID-19 crisis. He believes it would speed up the turnaround time further.
By our senior nurse managers in nursing homes not allowed to take swab tests themselves and present them maybe to their local care setting. I know in Waterford at the present time we've very successfully, using the Waterford UHW South East Regional Pathology Laboratory, we're turning swab tests around in under 24 hours. But it seems that if we to send out National Ambulance personnel to take swabs, why are we doing that when we have qualified people in-house to do it?
Dr Siobhan Kennelly's from the HSE.
Agree with the Deputy, and a number of CHOs have put in place training so that the nursing homes themselves can actually run that testing. Part of that then is around being able to get the tests to the relevant laboratories, and there is a testing pathway being put in place through it's a national that's coming through NEFIT and the HPSC, so that's going to be available to us in due course in terms of how that's going to be upscaled.
Protests erupted for a seventh day across the US over the death of George Floyd. The unarmed black man died while being restrained by police last week, as Trish Laverty reports.
Protesters in Dublin in a peaceful demonstration. The US Capitol, a different picture, with tear gas fired at people near the White House last night. The reigniting of the racism row in the US has seen a week of civil unrest, violence and looting nationwide. 6 police officers have been shot and injured. St Louis Police Chief is John Hayden.
Some coward fired shots at officers, and now we have 4 in the hospital. But thankfully, and thank God, they're alive. But can we make some sense out of this?
At least 40 cities imposed overnight curfews, and President Donald Trump has threatened to send in the army.
I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
An independent autopsy says George Floyd died from asphyxiation while in custody. The state's medical examiner disputes the findings.
Government formation talks continue this afternoon, with the window closing on getting a programme for government by the end of the week. A number of key sticking points have emerged over the weekend, as our political correspondent Sean Defoe reports.
The teams from Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Greens are still meeting in the National Emergency Coordination Centre in Agriculture House, a room usually reserved for planning for the worst storms Ireland has to endure. And in many ways that's exactly what they're doing, as the next government will look to recover from the COVID crisis. But until the last week, there's been little urgency to the talks. The leaders want to get the text of a programme for government signed off on by this week, but a number of key sticking points remain. There's still the meat of the issue on agriculture to be dealt with the 2 larger parties trying to ensure that any significant cuts to the country's carbon emissions are felt elsewhere. There's also still no agreement on building houses through the Land Development Agency, while the pension age is providing a sticking point as well. The tougher issues were meant to be kicked upstairs to the 3 party leaders this week, but that raises questions over Eamon Ryan's authority to rule on them. If the Greens' Catherine Martin hasn't agreed to it at a negotiating team level, can Ryan overrule her, given they may soon be competing for the party leadership? Nominations for that contest close on Sunday, providing another hard deadline for these talks, given that Catherine Martin has said that the Greens shouldn't have a contest until the issue of government's been settled. It's shaping up to be an interesting week in Leinster House.
A Waterford councillor says the resumption of public realm works in Tramore will impact the opening up of commercial activity in the town. The works, which include partial pedestrianisation of the main street and new communal areas, began before Christmas but were halted due to COVID-19 restrictions. They restarted last week. The CEO of Waterford Council says to postpone the continuation of the project would have major contractual implications. Councillor Joe Conway feels it's not the right time to restart the works.
The problem for the economy of the town is that it's going to shred the centre of the town at a time when the business people and the service industries would be hoping to have some sort of a regeneration of their economy. You won't really attract all that many people as customers if the centre of the town is replete with bulldozers and compressors and pneumatic drills.
WLR Sport, Ireland's local station of the year.
Starting with horse racing, where action continues today across the water behind closed doors at Kempton and Newcastle. Meanwhile, the manager of Tramore Racecourse says they will be able to make their behind closed doors meetings in July viable. Tramore will host an afternoon national hunt meeting on July 18th and an evening meeting on July 25th. Owen Byrne says staff costs are cut because they won't have punters at the course on the 2 days.
Our costs are reduced in some ways. We won't have staff here, unfortunately. Our costs in some ways have been reduced that way, but our revenue is severely restricted as well. But we're here to race. Our members, our shareholders and our board want us to race. We're an integral part of the racing family and cog in Ireland. We're not the biggest track in the world, but we still attract some very high quality horses. It's important that all different levels of racecourses operate.
In rugby, Premiership and Championship rugby clubs in England have been given the green light to return to training. They'll be allowed to train in small groups once they meet a number of criteria and commit to that in writing to league bosses and the English RFU. In soccer, Southampton great Matt Le Tissier is delighted that Ralph Hasenhüttl has committed his future to the club. The Austrian has signed a new 4-year contract at St Mary's. Le Tissier told Sky Sports News it's a brilliant move for the supporters.
The club was a little bit disorganised when Ralph came in, and his organisational skills and his leadership skills have really impressed the board at Southampton. And as you know, they stuck by him. From what I hear, Ralph is loving every day of being the Southampton manager and wants to stay there for a long time.
WLR asking you to stay at home. Our next bulletin is at 2.